Hi everybody, this is my first time publicly live on YouTube, so let's see how many things we can make go wrong. I think it'll be fun. You can see I have a picture of an ear here. This is what I'm going to be drawing today, and I have the ability to see your comments while I'm doing this live stream, so if you're watching it live, shoot me a comment, say hello. I like saying hello to all you guys. Feel free to ask any questions. This is going to be kind of informal. I'll talk about what I'm thinking and what I'm doing as I'm drawing. But basically, I just kind of thought it would be fun to get on here and go live. I've done some live drawing over on YouTube, and I've done live drawing for my students, but I haven't done it here on YouTube for my audience here. So if you end up liking this, let me know, and I may kind of make a habit of popping in here and doing some drawing and painting for you guys. And of course, if you want to follow along, and you want to do a drawing from the same photo as you're watching, please feel free to do that. I'll probably post this photo somewhere just in case you want to use it for a study as well. Hi, Nancy. Bonjour. I probably didn't say that right because I don't know anything about about French. I only know Spanish. Anyway, let's get to drawing an ear. That's where I will do a lot better. So I'll bring you over to the other camera. I have my ear, and probably this is not going to end up being, it's not going to look like it's really proportionate exactly because this camera is a little bit off to the side. So you can kind of see at the bottom, there's an angle here, just because, I can't have the camera right behind me because then my head just constantly gets in the way. Hi, Sarah. How you doing? Hi, Millie. Good to see you guys. So yeah, I'm just gonna kind of start sketching in my usual way. And if you've watched any of my videos or have taken any of my classes, you know I am super in love with straight lines. So, I'm not gonna necessarily do all my usual stuff to get really good proportion here. I'm not gonna do any like height and width measuring. I'm just going to try and eyeball these angles and make corrections as I go along. Hey Dee Dee, how you doing? Good to see ya. And I'll talk a little bit about what I'm using too. I have this paper that is no longer in production. So that's unfortunate. I feel like in the last few years, all my favorite things, my favorite papers, my favorite pencils, everything has kind of been like discontinued. So that's a bummer. This is a Kona Classic paper, and it was actually made here in Kansas City. And somebody bought them, I think like Speedball or Liquitex or someone like that bought Global Art Supply. So they shut down the Kansas City portion of that and moved everything somewhere else. So they discontinued that paper. But I like it because it's kind of like the Strathmore paper. Hey Pat, how you doing? It's kind of like the Strathmore toned gray and toned tan paper. So, I feel like it has a little bit more tooth. So I do like the toned tan and toned gray paper that Strathmore puts out, but it's kind of like a little bit slippery. It doesn't quite grab the charcoal exactly the way that I like it to. So it's not my favorite. I don't layer too much with that. Also, it's a little bit lighter value, as is this paper. This paper is kind of a light medium gray instead of I kind of like a dark medium gray, but it's still pretty good. So it's not always the one that I go toward, but I have been playing lately with doing more of a drawing than a painting. And what I mean by that is often I kind of approach my my drawings kind of like they're a painting. Like I do a lot of shading with the black and white, and I let them mix together, and then I kind of smear it around. So it has more of a painting effect in that sense that I'm mixing them together. And this is more, you know, I'm going to keep the charcoal and the white charcoal a little bit more separate. And that is, you know, partially due to the value of the paper. Since it's a lighter paper, it just doesn't quite look as good when I mix it together that way. I decided to draw an ear today because I've never drawn an ear live. I've drawn eyes live, mouths live, you know, portraits, pets, hair, all kinds of things, but never an ear. And I feel like, you know, ears are underestimated in their importance in a portrait. I have just seriously, you know, known that something was wrong with my portrait and I couldn't figure it out. And it turns out it was either the size, the shape, or the placement of the ears. And man, it makes a huge difference. So, you know, looking at this guy, I feel like overall I've got the ear maybe either too long or not wide enough. So I'm kind of thinking what I want to do. Do I want to shorten the ear, or do I want to make it wider, or maybe just a little bit of both? I think I'm gonna go with a little bit of both. Why not? So I'm just gonna kick it further out this way to begin with. I feel like I always need to make the wrong marks in order to get to the right ones. And one of my students was telling me something in a book, and I wish I could remember the name of the book. I think it's called like The Mastery Principle or something. Maybe I'm going to be able to look it up, you know, maybe partway through if I kind of take a little bit of a break or something like that. Maybe it's in my Amazon cart. But anyway, the point of that was that in this book, they say that one of the fastest ways to learn something is to just do it to the best of your ability, totally mess it up, and then kind of figure out how you could do it better. And that's kind of what I'm doing here, making the wrong marks first and just sort of seeing what I have and then assessing, you know, what's going on with this thing. What's wrong with it? How can I fix it? And that problem-solving process is really where you grow and where you learn. It's not about getting it perfect the first time. It's not about just, you know, magically putting it down and boom, it's just right. Every now and then it happens. It's pretty cool. But for me, not really. I usually have to kind of fight with it a little bit, analyze what's happening. And to be honest, all the artists that I have seen demonstrate when I've taken workshops or, you know, watched a demonstration somewhere, it just seems to be across the board. And maybe people don't always announce it like I just did and say like, oops, I made a mistake, I drew it wrong. They just kind of go about correcting it and then move along. And we don't notice. But, you know, in my experience, it's happening. They're making mistakes. They're making corrections just like everybody else. So you see that, I mean, this looks like it has some curves to it, but, you know, it's mainly constructed of straight lines. So I like to kind of just keep an eye on the trajectory of everything. What direction are things going, rather than trying to really nail down curves in this. So now I am kind of blocking in and outlining the shadow shapes. It's always part of my process. And as I'm doing this, I'm going to talk a little bit about the parts of the ear. Surprise, surprise. So this part around the outside here, this part, this is called the helix. And, you know, we want to make sure it doesn't stay completely parallel. I think one of the things that makes this look unnatural is when it's just kind of treated as two C shapes that match up. So we need it to be constantly either getting wider or tapering and getting more narrow in each section. So of course, overall, it goes from wider here to more narrow here. But if you notice at the end, it's actually getting wider again down here. Some places in the middle too, like here, I think, right about in there on this particular ear, this is kind of the thinnest part. It widens again this way. So make sure you're being specific with that and just kind of not like mindlessly copying that outside C shape, because it's really easy for us to do that. Now in here, this part, this is the anti-helix. So it's like there's a curved part and then there's this other curved form. But what I find really interesting is there's this little Y-shaped guy in here that just about everybody seems to have. And sometimes it's really pronounced and sometimes it's a lot more subtle, but generally you're going to see a raised form and another raised form and a little indentation in there, and it kind of becomes one form as we move down here. So always look for that. I find, you know, it really adds some dimension, and it's one of those things, right, with the human form in all different ways. Sometimes we know, like we may not know the details of it being there. We may not consciously realize that there is this formation, but we know it's missing when it's not there. Just part of being human and recognizing other humans, I guess. So just be on the lookout for that guy. And then this section in here is the conchia, that little, to me it's like a bowl. It's like a bowl or a funnel collecting sound. At least that's how I think about it. So I'm just kind of giving my first layer of shading. Basically everything in here is either receiving light directly from the light source or it's not. You know, on or off, yes or no, kind of a binary sort of a thing. I'm thinking about bringing the bottom of this up even a bit more. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. I like to make my corrections first and then take away what I don't need, because using that incorrect mark helps me get more quickly to the correct mark, because I can use it as a basis to judge how I should be changing that. It's also going to mean I'm going to raise up this shadow a bit, and that seems to make this light shape in there a little bit better. So then in here, I've got kind of a silly question for you guys. This is not related to drawing, but here we have this part here. That's the tragus. This little part that comes up here is the anti-tragus. And what I am curious about is, have you, when you plug your ears, like when you stick your fingers in your ears to get rid of the sound, Do you stick your finger in the ear canal or do you push on the tragus? I'm kind of curious because I thought it was just funny when I realized sometimes that people literally stick their finger in their ear canal to plug their ears. I was like, what is that all about? I have always just used this tragus here and pushed it over my ear canal, and I guess I thought that's what it was for. I thought that was the purpose of it. So it surprised me that other people do it a little differently. Speaking of the tragus, I'm gonna change that shape a little bit. Probably see me change the shape a lot. So Sarah, it sounds like you're like me, that you do the pushing on the tragus thing. I feel like that's the right way to do it, guys. Sorry for the rest of you, but and I'm giving a little bit of shading here, a little bit of halftone. All right, just a couple more shadows. Oh, interesting, you do both. That is interesting. So is it just random, or are there like different occasions? Like maybe if it's music, you do one, or if it's somebody talking, you do another. Got another tragus pusher here. Okay, and I've got a little bit of a shadow down here at the bottom of the lobe. Hopefully that's about the right distance. Let me, here, you know, what I'm doing here, I'm not really measuring, I'm just looking with my eye. I'm trying to estimate the difference in the space, you know, from here to here compared to there. So everything here is really just an estimate, not super exact. But that earlobe definitely now looks too wide. So I'm going to kind of look at the angle between the bottom of the tragus and the bottom of the earlobe to make sure I've figured out where it starts. And I'm going to do the opposite. It's the angle from there to that turn in the earlobe. And if I get that triangle right, and it's kind of showing me to bring it in maybe like this. So not too dramatic, but definitely it'll help. I also have to mention, I brought my dog here with me today. So I don't know if you guys can hear him in the background. I'm using a microphone to try and lessen the amount of background noise, but it's just been a long time since I had the opportunity to bring him here with me, because I only like to bring him on days that I'm alone and I don't have any classes or even any virtual classes. I decided to risk it today. So there's always a chance he's going to come bug me, or he's going to want to bark at something. But fingers crossed, he's been pretty quiet and pretty chill all day. It's just getting to be the end of the day, so he knows it's almost time to go. All right, so that's kind of my initial block in here. Get situated. And that's not too bad. What, we're about 20 minutes in. That's not too bad. Oh yeah, I'll have to show you my pup. I'm afraid to say his name right now because he might come over, but you guys can guess if any of you know the blue bird from the regular show. I have named him after the blue bird from the regular show because he is a really good friend in that show. Now, I didn't really talk about the pencils that I'm using, but I have today General's charcoal pencils, and I am using the hard pencils, the medium pencils, and the white pencils. I most of the time don't bother with the soft and extra soft because they're difficult to sharpen, because I like to use an electric pencil sharpener. And I have the white ones. And they got rid of my favorite ones, the extra hard. And I have my Fancy Pants AFMAT long point pencil sharpener, which I love and I can't live without. I did a review on this one, so if you want to know more about this, you should look for that review. And I found that they have another one as well. The same brand has another pencil sharpener, so I'm going to order it and do a compare contrast review on that one. But I love that pencil sharpener. And then I just have a regular kneaded eraser. I have this mono eraser on hand, but I'm not sure that I'll need it. So this might just be hanging out and not being used. And I don't think I'm going to use today any blending stumps or fluffy brushes or anything like that. I think I'm just going to go for a straight up drawing type of a thing. So, I think now what I'm going to do is I'm going to start looking for things that I want to sharpen right off the bat. And I'm going to think strategically about this because, of course, we kind of want to put hard edges around everything. But I think I'm going to get a nice sharp edge here because I definitely want that to feel like it's coming forward and it's sticking out. And then some of these places on this cast shadow, I'm going to make pretty sharp as well, especially where it's closer, so like where this helix here is closer to that cast shadow, I'll make it sharper. And I'm going to make it a little softer in here as it's further away, and then probably sharper up here. And that's just going to show, the distance from where the object is casting the shadow and where that cast shadow is. I think I'm also going to put a sharp edge here, here, and here. So we kind of have this pattern, like here, here, there, there, dun, 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 dun. Something like that. And then somewhere over in here, I'm going to make a nice sharp edge as well. I'm going to keep this softer, even though it's an outside edge. I'm going to keep that a little bit softer. So most of the focus is going to be in here. So I'm thinking about that focus just right from the beginning. That's funny with these General's charcoal pencils. They are my favorite brand, like by far. And my reason why they are my favorite charcoal, pencil brand, at least. I've got different types of charcoal. I have different favorites. But at least for the pencils, I like this brand because whatever kind of a binder they use doesn't get all sticky and gummy. There are some charcoals that, especially in the pencils, that if you build them up, they kind of just start to get tacky, almost like there's a clay or something that's used in the binder. And these don't tend to do that. They tend to stay nice and powdery. But one of the negatives that I've found is they're not super consistent, unfortunately. So this is a hard pencil, but I get medium pencils that are kind of equally as dark as this one. And sometimes I get medium pencils that are way harder than this and they don't make much of a mark. So that's, a little bit of a bummer. It's still, to me, worth it to use their pencils as opposed to anyone else's. But I will say, you know, just honest review here, that I wish there was a little bit more consistency. You know, every now and then I'll even get a pencil that it just seems so hard that it won't even draw. And I think they may have also changed their formula at some point in the last couple years, that maybe that's caused, just on average, for their pencils to be overall a little bit harder maybe. I'm not sure. But if anybody works over at the General's Charcoal Pencil Factory, and you have some inside knowledge, let me know. What's up with the pencils? What's going on? All right, so I've got a pretty sharp edge going here. Somewhere around in here, I'm letting it get just a little bit softer, so I'm having the pencil just kind of skate over that edge a little bit before I define it more thoroughly. And this cast shadow, you know, it's sort of straight over here, but I definitely want to give it a curve so it's describing that surface. I definitely want to make this form kind of roll around that edge. Because this part is a little bit higher in here. So we want to really use those marks to show that this area is higher and then it slopes downwards. I'm probably going to come back to this shadow and refine it a little bit later, but something like this can get a little tricky. You know, if we use a line here, it's just going to look fake. In nature, there are no lines. Lines are a stylistic thing, and they're not always bad. You know, it can look really beautiful to use line work. So we can use some symbolism in our kind of realistic drawing, just so long as we know what we're doing. But, you know, in something like this, we don't really want to make a line. We want to just show that shading. And that what's happening here is we have a surface that's kind of coming around this way, going into a little bit of a valley, not really a pointy one, and then coming out again that way. So something like that. Whereas, you know, over here, we have mark kind of coming around that way, going down in this valley, and then at some point, you know, it tucks behind this and emerges again. So we have more of a sharp edge there. We don't really have that edge down here. I love doing this exercise and just sort of drawing on top of the picture where I picture a bug would go or something like that, you know, if it was walking across the surface. A nice sharp edge in there. I think I want to look for a pencil here that's maybe even a little bit harder. Let's see how this one does. Yeah, that one's a little harder. Nice. Some of these little nuances, it can be harder to get with a medium pencil or a soft pencil. So there's definitely something in here I want to capture that I haven't been kind of getting yet, and that's how, you know, even though this shape kind of goes this way and this shape kind of goes this way, everything is pushing outwards, you know, so none of these curves are really concave, they're just convex overlapping curves. And so I really want to get that when I look at this section. See, there's kind of this curve going downwards here, another little curve there, and the same thing right there. There's a little tiny curve, so I want to make sure and get that, and in order to do it, I need a pretty sharp point. And the softer the pencil, the more that point wears away. Of course, you know, what you're drawing with is also not quite as dark, so that's the trade-off. So you kind of have to, you know, use each type when you need a certain kind of mark. Actually, I'm going to sharpen this up a little bit. Sorry for the noise. There's a little bit more of that curve. So I'm curious, is anybody out there drawing along with me at the same time? Switching back to my other hard pencil that was a little softer and darker, just to get some of this filled in more. So it's not going to be quite as nuanced, but it'll kind of fill it in a little bit faster. Hey Lisa, how's it going? Yay, Sarah and Millie are both drawing along. That's awesome. I kind of like that, you know, that thing when we're all drawing together and I get to see what you've done. It's nice. Then Lisa, just so you know, this is being recorded, so it'll be left up here on YouTube for you. You can come and take a peek at it whenever you are ready. So, you know, obviously, drawing an ear and having it be, you know, accurate and looking good is not necessarily as simple as just making some marks and having it come to life, right? Definitely, I've been studying different things for a long time and have some techniques that I use that get me here. And even when I'm not obviously making measurements, like I'm not taking a height measurement and moving it over and taking width and moving it over, there's some amount of like measuring practice that I have had. There are techniques that I'm using just by looking. So even if I'm not physically doing it, it's happening somewhere in my head. Hi Sebastian, how are you? Good to see ya. So yeah, you know, there are things that I'm doing here that I'm not necessarily articulating right now. I feel like this is kind of it's like a casual draw along, a casual lesson. But definitely you can find some stuff in my videos around here, like I think in my favorite life drawing method video, it's called something like that. I discuss, you know, some of the techniques that I use. I really like to use angles a lot and things like that. And if this is something you wanted to go more in depth with me about, you can look into one of my courses. I have a couple. I have one that's actually going to be live on portrait drawing. So this is coming up in the middle of February, early to mid-February, and it's going to be a live course. So I'm actually going to be just drawing live with you every week, and it's going to be on Zoom. So there's direct communication between both of us. So it's not just you watching me and following along, but I can also see what you're working on, see how you're doing, answer your questions, because you're, you know, going to be able to talk to me. And there's a forum attached with it as well. And I've just got a ton of, you know, recordings of myself drawing portraits and drawing facial features and teaching classes. So if you want to kind of learn how to pull it all together and you want hand holding, you might want to look into that. And, you know, otherwise, I mean, I've got a lot of stuff on YouTube. I take requests, and I don't know, I'm kind of interested in just making it a regular thing to come on here and draw stuff. Because it's fun. I like it. So Millie says, I need to work, let's see. Millie says, I need to work on not making hard lines at the beginning and watching and figuring out the direction the shading lines I make. Yeah, where you make a boardwalk. So that second part is really difficult because it takes knowledge of the 3 dimensions. So there are different ways to study that and get that. But yeah, it can be a challenge to get that. But, you know, trying this exercise, trying to draw along the surface, that's really helpful. Also, the more that you look at things in real life so that you can see what the surface looks like, that helps. And as far as not pushing hard, one of the ways you'll notice a lot of times when I'm drawing, not when I'm shading darker, but at the beginning, I hold my pencil kind of back here. So the pencil's just in my hand and I'm kind of holding it this way. That way it's almost impossible to push very hard, you know, so I'm sort of just dragging the pencil. So try that. Change the way that you're holding your pencil. If you're holding it up here, it's difficult to make light lines because, you know, this kind of grip was sort of made for like penmanship. So give that a shot. And then Sebastian is asking what kinds of pencils I use. And if you rewind a little bit, I go a little bit more into that. But I've got General's charcoal pencils in hard, medium, and white. And so far I've just been using a couple different hard ones. Some of these are really, you know, some of the hard ones are hard. Some of the hard ones are really more like a medium. And that's all I have today for pencils. In terms of mark direction too, you know, I was thinking I want to spend a bunch of time doing some different exercises because I would like to develop some additional marks to what I already make. So I feel like I have the light and wispy mark kind of down. For the most part, I can do that pretty well. I kind of want to work on some bolder lines, like the kind of lines that you would do if you were engraving or, you know, doing like the kind of lines that are on the presidents on money. I don't know. I just think it would be cool to develop another mark now that I kind of have one that I work with a lot. But for now, this is kind of the one that I know. Just I'm holding my pencil back here as I'm doing this, and that just creates, you know, light pressure on the paper. And I'm making these marks primarily going in one direction as well, so that they taper. And that helps to make a transition so that you're not shading in stripes. Now this edge is pretty sharp too because there's a cast shadow here. And then somewhere over here that skin just connects. So I'm going to try and illustrate that a little bit. Right now my dog is just pleasantly sleeping behind me. It's so nice. Hopefully he doesn't start snoring. So I'm kind of wondering if I want to really include hair in this or if I want to make an outline. I'm kind of feeling like maybe I want to make an outline. But I do really like these little curled hairs there, so I'm torn. I'm kind of wondering, can I get away with doing an outline and having the hairs there at the same time? I wonder. But I think before I do any more shading on this, I'm going to do that. I'm going to put in a really sharp line. I'm going to sharpen a pencil again. Sorry, guys. All right, so I'm going to do the outline erase afterwards. And I said I kind of wanted to make this the sharpest area of that outline. So I'm going to kind of start there. And I'm trying to go slow and deliberate so I can just keep looking back and forth and follow that trajectory change. And you know, I wouldn't say that that is exact, but I want to keep my lines fresh, so I'm not going to worry about exact. This isn't a bark plate, it's just a drawing. That I am going to change there. I need that trajectory to go a bit lower. So yeah, something a little more like that. So I'm going to get rid of that top line, let that kind of fade off. Little kneaded eraser action here. I'm also going to put in a line here, even though there's shading there to kind of show it. So I just want to make that super crisp. But here, I'm going to end up relying on some shading here. Pick up that line again here, and then I'm really kind of deliberately going to let it fade off. The same here. I want to have a line here and then fade it away. You know, it's kind of interesting. Lines are symbolic, so they're not realistic, but they can kind of symbolically give information to us. So for example, if something's going away from us, if we make that line get thinner and lighter, it's going to appear that it's receding. All through here, I'm going to use a really light line because, you know, we have a light area next to a light area, so I don't want it to be too bold. Actually, now I see there a change in the shape I would like to make. Actually, I'm not going to. So this is too low. That little part right there is too low. It probably needs to be pushed up, but I don't know. When I look at the drawing, I kind of like the character, even though it's not really, you know, exactly matching that ear. So I take it back. I'm going to leave it there. And then I'm just going to do a little bit more line work right in here because, you know, this section here of this anti-tragus into there and around this part of the conch, this is an edge. And then it just becomes shading. It's just a plane change. So of course, to be very realistic, I shouldn't put a line there, but I'm kind of doing a stylized thing here. So I'm going to continue that line up here. I'm going to let the line become sort of quiet there where these values are closer to each other. Pick up the line here. I'm going to kind of have two lines almost overlap there. All right, and then again, just let the line disappear. So this is kind of fun. Got a little bit of symbolism going on, a little bit of realism going on. So now I'm going to really try and get some light shading in here that defines that form. So more of these marks, kind of some marks more that go this direction around the helix. So, you know, these really curved directional marks, some marks that show a little bit more what's happening here in terms of this curve going into this depth, up and around. Just all these like directions of the surface. Hey Mona, good question. How often does the tip of the pencil break? I would say for me, kind of often, just because I drop my pencils all the time. I'm super clumsy. But you know, since I use so little pressure on the pencil as I'm drawing, I don't usually break the pencil while I'm drawing with it. The time that I have that happen the most is when I'm trying to get a really bright, just like one spot on a highlight, and then I'm often breaking it in that situation. You know, but otherwise, like this style of shading, it doesn't happen too often just because the pressure is so incredibly light. And you know, if you have an issue with the pencil breaking a lot, try holding it far away. That should help that happen a little bit less. So I don't know how well these marks are showing up for all of you. Just these really light wispy lines. but I really love using those directions to define the surface once I get to this point. I use directional marks probably a little bit less in the shadow. If you think about it, there's less information in the shadow since there's not very much light, and light is what gives us information. But in the light side, you know, we've got a lot of information. So we really want to include those directional marks whenever we can. Actually, there's a really nice subtle value transition that's happening here just as this emerges from shadow and goes into halftone. It's happening really slowly. So here it's really fast, just from shadow, boom, into light. But here that's happening really slowly. It's really kind of delicate and nice. So I want to make sure and capture that a little bit. Mona, do you mean the sound of the tip of the pencil breaking is satisfying, or the sound of drawing? I love all these little teeny mark directions. Look how they just kind of radiate out. So I've got the marks going that way, and then as we go around the helix, they just change direction the whole time. Oh my god, I love puns. Thank you, Mona. That's fun. Someone told me I should make, I forget what they're called, but they're those videos and stuff like that, that it's because the audio is soothing. So pencil marks might qualify. A lot of these marks have been going across the form. What I'm doing here is probably considered more along the form, but it just seems to, I don't know, make sense. So, you know, in terms of mark direction, there's not always just one answer and one correct way to do things. There are a bunch of different ways to do things. But you definitely want to think about the meaning behind your marks. You know, the meaning behind really everything. The direction, you know, are you picking up your pencil each time? What's the quality of the mark itself? Is it a bold mark? Is it soft? All these things give us information about the thing that you're drawing. And I think that's why we all just want to blend to death. You know, when you have that urge to just blend every mark out of your work, it's usually because you're not happy with the meaning of your marks and what information each mark is conveying to you. All right, well, we are at 5:30. I don't feel like I am done with this, but it's probably about time for me to get heading home for dinner. I am hungry. So if you guys are interested, I would love to go live and finish up this ear with you maybe next week or something like that. Because, you know, I think I could put a couple highlights on here, but I would love to just really do a nice job on this instead of just kind of throwing it together at the end. So if you're interested in that, let me know. And thank you, Mona. That's really kind of you. Thank you for that comment. And yeah, thank you so much. And I appreciate just hearing that feedback. So let me come on over back to this face camera. Okay, so there we have it. For now, I've started drawing the ear. Just to kind of recap some of the stuff that we talked about, I started off with straight lines, just kind of looking at the trajectory of everything. And in this case, I didn't do very much in terms of actual measuring. I didn't measure the height, I didn't measure the width. I kind of measured some different angles and things like that. But, you know, most of it was just kind of measuring done by eye based on all the things that I practice and that I also teach in my classes that help train your eye over time. And if you're literally making the measurements when you practice, then when you're just drawing, it's easier to look and assess the size of things. So I was just using my eye to kind of make measurements and that kind of a thing. Once I had a really blocky outline, I got a shadow shape in there. I do that every single time on everything I do, regardless of if it's drawing or painting. So yeah, step number 1, get a block in. Step number 2, block in that shadow. Started shading the shadow, really thought about where I wanted sharp edges and outlines and where I wanted things to be softer, and then really worked on the mark direction and having those mark directions kind of sit on the surface and follow the form. So it sounds like there is some interest to continue this next week. So I'm gonna just basically plan on that. I'm gonna show up next, what day is today? Today is Tuesday. I'm gonna show up next Tuesday at 4:30 Central Time, and I'll continue working on this ear. Come back, follow along with me. And Millie, your question, what do I do with all my drawings? I have some in a notebook. So this that I'm working on, this is just a notebook, and I've got a bunch of drawings in there. Some of them I throw in a drawer. Some of them I frame and send to a gallery or sell. But you know, I'm not the best at kind of leveraging my drawings in any way. So if you guys have any ideas like what I should do with my drawings, let me know, because right now I just kind of, for the most part, pile them somewhere. And I don't use fixative. That's another question that I've gotten a lot. I don't trust the stuff, but I should probably experiment with it a bit because I get asked about it so much. I don't have any recommendations because I just don't personally use it. If I'm worried about my stuff smearing, then I will tape another piece of paper over the top to prevent it from smearing. But for the most part, I just figure if I did it once, I can do it again. So if it smears, like, oh well, I'll just have to fix it if I want to do something with it. So yeah. Well, thank all of you for hanging out with me. I appreciate the questions. I appreciate the encouragement and just kind of like to feel connected with you all. And then somebody asked to see my dog before we go. He's been so good. He's been quiet. I think he's just asleep behind me. So yeah, you guys, oh my God. Let me see. This is a little dangerous, but let's see if I can get the camera down on him. Almost there. There he is. Mordecai. Hey, buddy. There he is. So his name is Mordecai, named after the blue bird in the regular show because he's such a good friend. And this guy right here, Mordecai, is totally totally my best friend. So, okay. Thank you all. Thank you, Mordecai, for being nice and quiet today. And I'll see y'all in a week.